Hey team, welcome back. So what do you do when your gun doesn't behave the way you are used to seeing it behave in live fire, right? So there's some dry fire things you can do to dial in what you're doing with your grip on a pistol when the pistol isn't behaving in a way that you're used to seeing or you would like to see. Maybe you've never seen it behave perfectly or well and you wanted to change its behavior. So we're going to look at how the grip interacts with the gun, maybe some things you can do to test it a little bit, and what you might think about to change the inputs on it in order to actually get a better result. So this topic has come up before where people are like, hey, how do I dial in my grip? So I've had many videos on grip before. You should make sure that you're going in order. But just a couple of days ago, I was at the range. I was working on the 92XI, which is my single action pistol that I actually use the most. I carry this pistol with just a flush barrel and a smaller magwell. It's the same pistol, same dot, same trigger, the whole thing. But I had been spending the last couple of months so many hours on my double single pistol, which is a little bit heavier. The grip feels a little shorter because of the way the beaver tail is. So in other words, the grip feels the grip of the pistol, not the grip of my hand. The grip of the pistol feels just a little bit different. It is just a little bit different, and the gun is a little bit heavier. There's just enough differences where I spent so many hours on that that I brought that grip and input to this pistol, and it doesn't quite work the same. Now, how many people could tell? Probably not anybody until I get to 20-25 yards. Like, you're gonna start seeing maybe a little bit different hits on targets, and maybe up close you might see a little bit more open spread of pairs. So maybe some people could tell, like, hey Fabio, what's going on with your shooting? Probably nobody cares. For me, I could tell immediately the way the gun was behaving, it wasn't quite the same. So what did I do to fix it? I wanted to bring that to you. The whole story was to bring to you how I dial it back in. So anytime I'm seeing the pistol behaving in a different way, I can go to Dryfire. I don't have to spend a bunch of money on live fire rounds. I can go confirm in live fire rounds that what I am doing in Dryfire is actually making a difference and moving me in the right direction. So obviously I want to make sure that I am finding my ideal spot on the pistol, right? Like, this one allows me to get a little bit higher on the pistol. So I'm trying to find, like, I'm holding my gun enough times throughout the day where I'm like, yep, that's what it feels like to have my dominant hand in the right place. I have the structure the way I want it. I have the pressure the way I want it. And then as I build my grip, I'm paying attention and locking it in the back. I have my index finger and my middle finger in the right places on the pistol. And I have my thumbs where I want. So, like, I am making sure that it feels like home every time I pick up this pistol. Now, it doesn't take very long because, again, I've shot this pistol probably the most out of all the Berettas that I have because, you know, that's what I carry, and I compete IDPA and all that other stuff with it. So why did it feel different? Because I was using the other one. This one I was using a little bit less. How do I go back home? I go start feeling like that familiarized, like, yeah, that's the pressure that I want. That's where I want my gun to interact with my hands, and it starts to feel familiar. If you don't know what that is, right? So for me, I can go straight to, like, what feels like home. If you don't know what that is because maybe your gun hasn't behaved properly before, or maybe it's a new platform. Maybe you go between platforms a lot. Maybe you shoot a Glock sometimes you shoot a Walther, sometimes you shoot a Beretta, sometimes you shoot a, I don't know what, CZ, whatever. If you're going between platforms for different reasons, you're going to have to find that home again. And if it's a new pistol, you don't know what home is. So how do you find out what home is in Dryfire? Now, again, you have to do this in Dryfire for a little while, then go test it in live fire. You don't have to have a lot of rounds. 20, 25, 50 rounds where you're very careful and paying attention to how the gun is behaving while you're shooting it at speed, right? Doing doubles, that kind of thing. So I'm going to point to, I don't know if you guys can see it, but I have a simulated plate rack over here, right? So it's very small. I don't know, it's probably a 1-inch circle. I don't know, something like that. And I have a little blue paster in the middle of it. So I'm going to put my gun on that spot. I'm going to put my eyes on that spot. And I'm going to try to keep the gun in that circle. Now, I'm looking even smaller to the blue paster or whatever, but I want to try to keep the gun in that circle. And my goal is to smack on that trigger pretty aggressively as if I was doing a build drill. So like 6 rounds. 6 rounds of aggression. Now, I'm not going to do that where I'm going to do like a crazy like first shot, right? Like you guys remember that once I make contact with the trigger, it does me no good to come off the trigger unless I'm having like, you know, trigger reset issues, but I'm not gonna go there, right? So I'm going to smack the trigger on the first shot as if I was just coming out of the draw and then stay connected to the shoe, but I'm gonna move the trigger aggressively as if I was shooting very, very aggressively, all right? So not a lot of travel, but definitely aggression in how quick I press the trigger. And my goal would be that I am noticing how my gun behaves in relationship to the spot that I'm looking at. So if I'm seeing slashes, like, you know, if the spot is here, the dot is on it, and I'm seeing slashes, like long slashes, like lots of movement like that, that probably tells me something about what my input on my support side needs to do. Probably tells me some input on my dominant hand and what it is doing. Maybe it's doing too much, maybe it's doing too little, yada, yada, yada. So I'm gonna start on that. I've done this process a couple of times even this week just to dial this back in. But I'm gonna talk to you about what I've seen, what I'm noticing, and maybe there's some things that you can consider so that you're also paying attention to those things. So I'm gonna put my gun on that little spot. Obviously, the dot is probably, I don't know, 1/8 or 1/10 of the entire circle. So it's taking quite a bit of the circle, but I want to stay very connected to the blue spot, and I want to slam on the trigger first shot, and then 5 more connected to the shoe, and I want to see how much movement there is. So here we go. I'm going to get the grip that I want, familiar, like home, and smash. And so on that very first one, I am noticing like almost like a vertical travel, which tells me my lower finger. So if you're seeing a noticeable vertical travel on dry fire gun, like there's no ammo, there's no explosion, it's not coming up and down, and I am noticing just like the dot moving inside the circle. So it's not bad inside the circle, but it's moving up and down. I'm doing too much with my lower 3 fingers, and I am like jamming on the gun a little bit as I'm pressing the trigger. So there's some sympathetic movement between my trigger finger and these guys. So I'm gonna try to isolate that, make sure that that doesn't happen. So once I set the pressure, I want nothing else to change in my dominant hand other than the trigger finger moving. So here, there's home. Notice I have removed the draw. I am getting the grip the way I want it. And again, now the dot was almost like doing this thing, like almost like shaking back and forth, like almost like left to right and maybe a little bit up. So a lot less input from our lower fingers. That is an immediate fix that you can do in dry fire at home. If you only did like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes of this, like a couple times a week, you would start letting go of that bad habit of jamming on the gun like this with your lower fingers. Now, you do have to go confirm in live fire that you're actually able to sustain that while the gun is going off, right? Here, it's a lot easier to pay attention to how the gun is behaving around the spot because there is no explosion, there is no smoke, there is no lift of the gun. So this is why dry fire is so important, because you're removing some of the distracting factors and you're putting in the correct inputs on the gun, all right? So another thing that might happen a lot, if I'm gonna, this time on purpose, relax my support hand a bunch, and I'm gonna start slamming on the trigger, ready, go. Yeah, so I went 1, like the gun moved down a little bit, and then 2, like the gun moved way left, completely off, almost touched the circle next to it, and then came back, and then they started doing like this thing where it's like behaving a little bit to like up, down and to the left, down to the left, down to the left, because I just relaxed my support hand on how it was interacting with the grip. So even in dry fire, even though there's no explosion, now I can be very careful to like pay attention to like, oh my gosh, every time I press the trigger, when my support hand isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, I'm getting this like dip, a little, but mostly left, and the gun is behaving more left to right. When your grip pressures are not correct and you're changing them throughout the shooting sequence, especially when shooting aggressively, you're going to notice quite a bit of lateral movement, and that's no good. So 1, yes, get the grip where you want it. 2, make sure that the pressure is correct, and then make sure that it is consistent as you're pressing the trigger the entire time. No more, no less, no adding, no subtracting, none of that stuff, right? So if I am adding dominant hand pressure as I press the trigger aggressively, I'm going to see more vertical movement. If I add or remove support hand pressure, I'm going to probably see more lateral movement. Again, I have a small spot to reference it to, right? Now, the other things that you might play with is like how high on the beaver tail or the back strap of the gun you are is going to make the gun move differently. So if you're having issues with structure, I just talked about strength and pressures, right? But if you're having issues with structure, like how far should my left hand be back? How far should my left hand cover the back strap of the gun. Like, where does my dominant hand, middle finger interact with the gun? Where under the trigger guard should I be? Where does my index finger touch my dominant hand, middle finger? Where does my palm of my support hand interact with the backstrap and side panel of the gun? If you start changing, like, just pick one you like. Okay, I think that's gonna work pretty good, and you go again. Okay, ready and go. Okay, that is you're going to see something. Then you change it slightly. Maybe like you move it up or down or sideways a little bit, or unwrap it in or unwrap it a little bit, and you start seeing what behaves best for you, because this is very personal. How big your grip of the gun is, how large your hands are, how strong your hands are. All of that stuff is going to matter for you. So dial it in based on the information that you're collecting in Dryfire, like this. Small spot, little thing, eyes connected, reference what you're changing and how the gun is moving, reference to that spot that you're looking at. And for you, I would even start taking notes, go, hey, when I do this and I set this pressure and it doesn't change, I get this good behavior. When I do this and the pressures aren't quite right, I get this behavior out of the gun. Because it might be slightly different than what I got. In general, I'll give you, like, you know, the general rules that most people would normally see. But for you, like, mark it down. Okay, hey, when I do this, I get this. When I do this, I get this. If I have my middle finger and index finger interacting with each other like this, I get this. When my palms are closed in the back of the gun, I get this. What you'll find is you have the recipe for the very best grip that you can put on your pistol in Dryfire, and then you go to the live range, and with 20, 30, 50 rounds, if you're doing maybe doubles, or just, you know, if you can't perceive doubles, maybe even like a reactive shooting pace, like a practical shooting pace, like boom, 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 where the gun starts going off, you don't let the gun stop completely. As soon as it returns to the spot, you react to that and you press the trigger, boom, 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 7, 10 yards, something like that. And you're essentially collecting a movie of what is going on with the gun. And then you're like, okay, did I do the thing that I have been dialing in at home? If I am doing that and the results aren't quite right, what can I change? What one input on the very next 4 or 6 rounds can I implement so that I can get maybe possibly a different result? And then you might find something inside 50 rounds. You're like, yeah, this behaves the best. Okay, what does that look like and feel like? Look at your hands. Okay, this is where my structure is around the pistol. This is the kind of input that I'm giving the gun. Great. Unload, put your gun away, go home, memorize that. Go dry fire that a bunch from just like holding the gun the way I want it. Okay, cool. I have it the way I want it, and oh, that was beautiful. Feels perfect. A little bit of left side movement, a little bit more support hand pressure, and man, that felt really good. The gun didn't move at all. And again, the gun didn't move at all, and now I am memorizing based on information I have from live fire and based on what I'm seeing in reference to a spot in dry fire, that I am dialed in for the grip that is ideal for this pistol. What other factors are there? Well, what kind of ammo do you use, right? Do you use just factory 115, 1200 feet per second, 1150 per second, feet per second kind of ammo that maybe pushes against you a little bit more, or do you use a little bit softer ammo like 980, 1000 feet per second, whatever? Like the type of ammo you use, the type of powder in that ammo will give you a little bit of different input. I am telling you that is not as relevant or as important as dialing this in. If I get somebody's nasty, gross 115 foul rounds or whatever, you give me a magazine worth of that, I'll be dialed in fine. Because all I need to do is adjust the types of input and maybe a little bit of strength or pressures. As I'm watching the gun go off, I'm like, yeah, I'm seeing that behavior that I've seen in dry fire and live fire before, and I know how to fix that. If I see the behavior of a gun as I'm behind it in reference to a spot that I've seen before, I know what adjustments and I know what the recipe is for fixing that. All I have to do is apply that solution. So when something is going wrong for me on any of my platforms, or something is not going as ideal, I don't know that anything really goes wrong per se, but if it's not going in an ideal fashion, maybe I had a funky reload to a weird grip or something like that, I can go straight to like, I've seen this before. I know how to adjust and fix that on the fly as I am going at full speed. I can adjust and give myself some solutions on the go. This is what I want for you as well. If you're noticing something behind the gun that you're like, man, I know what that is. I've seen it before because I did it in Dryfire. Like, I know how to fix that because I have my recipe. And then I've seen it in live fire as well. I know how to fix that. Then you can fix it on the go under pressure. Does that make sense? So spend time with this type of activity to dial in your very best structure around the gun and your very best grip pressures or strength, whatever you want to call it, around the grip. Then go in live fire and pay attention. There's nothing better, there's no better solution for you to get better as a shooter than paying attention to everything that's going on while you have your gun in your hand, right? So be very focused in your dry fire sessions, be very focused in your live fire sessions, because you're wasting your most valuable assets, right? Your resources, your time and your money. If you're not paying attention, you're just pissing it all off, right? Pissing it away. Don't do that, right? Like, pay attention to everything's going on. Then, because you have a volume of like, what's the word? You'll have a volume of things you've perceived, a volume of experience, I guess. You're like, I've been in those circumstances. I've seen those things and how they happen, whatever, and what's happening, and I know how to fix it. If something goes wrong or weird or whatever while you're shooting, you'll know how to fix it. And you'll know how to assess it for yourself. You should not need an instructor to come over there and be like, hey man, like your support hand is getting weak on the gun, or hey, you have too much input on. If you've never seen it before, you won't even recognize that you're doing it in live fire until you go look at the target. If you have been doing this type of activity before you go to the target in live fire, you're like, yeah man, I definitely felt the input that I did on this gun. I definitely felt my support hand. Why? Because I'm looking to a spot and the gun is behaving in a way right, that I don't recognize because I've seen my gun behave properly before, and that's not proper behavior of the gun. All right, so I know there was a significant amount of talking, not my favorite thing to do, but it is part of describing, because you can't see what I am seeing, right? Maybe someday I'll figure out how to put a camera on to see what I'm seeing. There's no great way to do that because there's so much going on, but if I can describe what I'm seeing, hopefully you can pay attention when you do those things and notice similar or different behaviors. Then you can assess, fix, and have your own recipe for success. All right. I hope that helps you a bunch. Let me know if you have any questions. Get after it.